We have two objectives in this lesson. We want to be able to evaluate piecewise functions, and then we also want to be able to graph piecewise functions. We're going to get started with the first objective, which is evaluating piecewise functions. In example 1, we are given the graph of the piecewise function. Later on in this lesson, we will learn how to form this graph. But for now, we will only be evaluating it. So the first thing we want to evaluate is f of -1. So we want to plug x equal -1 into the function. But to do that, we can see that this function has 2 separate pieces. So we first have to decide which piece are we going to use when we plug x is equal to -1 into the function. Are we going to use piece 1 or are we going to use piece 2? Well, that depends entirely on the conditions that each piece has. The first piece has the condition that x is less than 0, and the second piece has the condition that x is greater than or equal to 0. So when we evaluate the function at x is equal to -1, we have to use piece 1 because -1 is less than 0. So I'm going to write a little note here that says use 1. Because if we plug in x is equal to -1, that is less than 0. So I'm going to be plugging -1 into the first piece. So I will be taking -1, squaring it, and adding 1. I'm plugging into this expression here. -1 squared is a positive 1, and 1 plus 1 is 2. So f of -1 is 2. And we can see that on the graph as well, because if we look on the graph, when x is -1, we can see that we have the point -1, 2. So our answer was that y coordinate right there. Now we want to evaluate the function at 5 when x is equal to 5. This time we are going to use piece 2 because 5 is greater than or equal to 0. 5 satisfies the second inequality. It does not satisfy the first inequality because 5 is not less than 0. So when I plug 5 in, I'll be plugging 5 into x minus 1. So I'll be replacing that x with 5 to give us 5 minus 1, which is 4. So f of 5 is 4. Lastly, we will be evaluating the function at 0, and we will again be using the second piece because the second inequality has the or equal to on 0. So if we want to plug in 0, we have to use the piece that includes 0, which is the second piece, because 0 is greater than or equal to 0. So I will be plugging 0 into x minus 1, replacing that x with 0 to give me 0 minus 1, which is -1.